we've made it to the end of 2021 and some pretty great movies have come out this year. But those aren't the films we're talking about today. Today we're talking about the movies that maybe started with a good idea but just fell apart in the execution. Or we're talking about movies that started with a terrible idea and got even worse with the execution.
Sometimes people drop stinkers.
These are my picks for the 10 worst movies of 2021. Number 10, Old. M. Night Shyamalan movies are like a box of chocolates.
You never know what you're gonna get.
To his credit, whether his movies are good or bad, they're always worth talking about. He's great at coming up with these catchy concepts that are immediately intriguing.
I see dead people.
But unfortunately, more often than not over the last 15 years, he fails to develop a story around those great central concepts.
What? No.
And far too often, his last-minute plot twists are more groan-inducing than groundbreaking. He has certainly made some great films. Old just isn't one of them. It takes this intriguing concept about what if there was a beach where everyone aged rapidly and just turns it into a series of body horror episodes to kill almost everybody off. All the characters are reduced to just their age, occupation, and a single personality trait. And the movie includes this great idea where a pair of kids under the age of 10 hook up in a tent.
Ooh.
And the rotten cherry on top of it is this last-minute non sequitur plot twist that instead of reframing everything you've seen before in a meaningful way that ties everything together, instead we get this conspiracy theory about medical research.
Why?
There's a few nice horror effects here and there, but mostly this movie just wastes a great concept. Real quick, while I'm sharing my picks for the worst movies of the year, be sure to share your picks down below in the comments section. Number 9, Infinite. Now this is a fantasy sci-fi action film from a director that I like with a cast that I like. This should be a movie that I just absolutely eat up.
Some things should work, but do they?
Unfortunately, this movie is a jumbled mess of cliches. It feels a little bit like somebody took the scripts for The Matrix, The Highlander, The Bourne Identity, and a list of tropes from action, sci-fi, and fantasy, put them all in a blender, mixed them up, and filmed it.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
It steals from the absolute best films and delivers an entirely forgettable one. It's also a movie that feels like it was dramatically reworked in the editing room, as if while they were putting the finishing touches on it, they decided that this was going to be a Mark Wahlberg vehicle and they wanted to just push everyone else to the side. So they cast Dylan O'Brien in a pretty important role in the film, and then he's barely in the final product.
Why would we do that?
It has all the ingredients to be an easy win for me, and it really didn't work at all. It is a mess. Number 8, Injustice. Here they take some of the most interesting DC source material and turn it into one of their worst animated movies. It starts off well enough with a tragedy pushing Superman to do more extreme things, thus dividing the Justice League. But instead of trusting the dramatic tension from that central conflict, they follow the tried and true hero versus hero trope of bringing in an outside villain so our heroes team up to battle the common foe, and it just cheapens the entire story.
Bogus.
But that's what makes this movie disappointing. The reason it's included on this list is at one point in time in the story, a main character dies, we then follow him into the afterlife, and then follow him back to the Earth as a ghost.
You serious?
Instead of trusting the established central concept, we get a ghost story. I don't know if that's in the original graphic novel or not, but wow, somehow they managed to take this great Justice League story and make just a terrible movie out of it. Number 7, Coming to America. Long delayed comedy sequels kind of have a bad reputation for being dreadful because of movies like this. Coming to America continues the story of Akeem, but it utterly fails to capture the charm of the original, and it doesn't seem to even understand why people liked that movie in the first place. The original was a fish out of water comedy about this naive but good-natured member of royalty who goes to New York City in search of love. It might have been an R-rated comedy, but is actually very sweet and kind-natured at its core. This is The Princess Diaries in Africa with 15 subplots too many and kind of a mean streak running throughout it. It cannot pick a focus.
You stay focused.
The movie spends all of its time with Akeem's son, but then in the final moments wants to have this big, gigantic victory for his daughter, whom we haven't spent much time with, as she brings down a literal patriarchy.
Not impressed.
But worst of all, it takes this great character and good man in Akeem, and in the early scenes of the movie, has his father verbally emasculate him, and then it goes on to present him as manipulative, cowardly, and incompetent.
No, don't like that.
I just don't understand what was gained by bringing this franchise back just to drag its title character through the mud. Number 6, Cinderella, a bizarre misfire on almost every single level. It's a 21st century retelling of Cinderella by writers who seem to think that the Cinderella story is sexist and misogynistic.
Not a great plan.
So you get a version of the story that goes out of its way to include plot points to tear down the patriarchy and make it clear that Cinderella will not choose a man over her career. And if that's not entertaining enough, it's a musical where they just use pop songs instead of writing their own songs, and then they try and squeeze those songs into the movie as character development. It's a movie where the best joke in the entire film involves James Corden's head appearing on the body of a mouse. It's not clever, it's not actually a good joke, but at least you remember the horrifying image.
I thought my jokes were bad.
To be fair, the cast seemed to be having fun, and this really isn't my kind of thing, but I thought it was just cringe from beginning to end. Number 5, Hes All That. I kid you not, in what could be described as the worst double feature of all time, on August 29th, I watched Cinderella and followed it immediately by Hes All That, because I use my time wisely. And I woke up August 30th with a deep sense of cynicism towards the world and substantially fewer brain cells. Actually, the brain damage might have started right at the end of Cinderella, because when we got 15 minutes into this film, I was confused as to why there wasn't any soccer, because I thought it was going to be a remake of She's the Man. Here I am! Not She's All That. I went to public school in Texas and graduated very low in my class. Anyway, this movie is a 21st century gender-swapped remake of She's All That, a 1990s high school adaptation of My Fair Lady, which was a musical remake of Pygmalion. That was quite the sentence to say. As someone that was in high school when She's All That came out, the movie wasn't exactly a top contender screaming for a remake in the first place. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin with this movie. The lead character's characterization is just absolutely bizarre. He's a punk rocker that listens to Bad Brains and Bad Religion, but he also takes artistic photographs, rides horses every single morning, and is willing to cut his hair to go to a Great Gatsby party with people he doesn't like?
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
From there, the movie's premise and existence violates its central message. It wants to make some sort of statement about living your authentic life and not just living for subscribers. And then they cast a TikToker in the lead role because of her subscriber count. Whoops. And it is that nonsensical message that really puts this movie on the list. It wants to pretend like it's telling a story about authentic living, but in reality, it's a movie that celebrates and rewards a vapid lifestyle that uses people for the purpose of growing a subscriber base. Number 4, Sweet Girl. Now, I'm an utter sucker for revenge thrillers, so the fact that they managed to make a revenge thriller starring Jason Momoa and it made it onto this list is actually kind of impressive. It's an utterly contrived plot held together by coincidences and cliches. It's ill-conceived from top to bottom. Like right off the bat, a revenge thriller probably isn't the best vehicle to make a statement about big pharma and the healthcare system. They're just not really compatible. All of that would make this movie forgettable, but not bottom 10 worthy. Where this one just goes off the rails is that it features the most bonkers, jump the shark plot twist of the entire year. I mean, it is one of the worst plot twists I have ever seen in a movie.
And you blew it! You blew it.
This is a prime example of a movie trying so hard to be clever that it undermines its own credibility and sabotages everything in the movie that might have worked if the movie had just played it straight.
You've made a huge mistake.
In the end, it is a disaster that's only memorable for peeing its pants with this dumb plot twist. Real quick before I give you my bottom 3, I've got a pair of companion videos to this over on my Patreon page. One of those is a video with 5 more of my picks for the worst movies of the year, and the other one is a video with my picks for the 10 most disappointing movies of 2021.
That's great!
You can unlock those companion videos as well as hundreds of other exclusive videos and live streams by joining at any level. For just $22, you can get all of the exclusive videos in 2022 by getting an annual membership.
That's all you have to do!
If you enjoy my content, Patreon is the #1 way to support my channel. The link is down below in the description if you're interested. Number 3, Home Sweet Home Alone. In 2019, Disney acquired 20th Century Fox and thus the rights to the Home Alone franchise. Therefore, Disney could remake Home Alone. Thus we have Home Sweet Home Alone.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
I suppose it's commendable that they decided to change up the ingredients just a little bit instead of just doing a beat-for-beat, shot-for-shot remake.
You know, you read what others had done, and you took the next step.
But the change they decided to make was making the robbers sympathetic and the focus of the story. Let's stop and think about this for a little bit. The Home Alone franchise is famous for having these third acts where a child booby traps their house and then robbers step into the traps and scream in agonizing pain. The writers of this movie thought, you know how we can make that better? Instead of the robbers being bad people trying to wrong a child, what if they're good people only stepping into the traps because of a misunderstanding? Are they actual sadists? Did they take the memes on the internet seriously that talked about Kevin being a sociopath in the original films, or the Home Alone movies being like a prequel to the Saw films? Like, who thought making the robbers sympathetic before we torture them was a good idea? Simply put, this is one of the most misguided remakes of all time. And there's no excuses for how unpleasant this movie turned out because they had the budget, they had the cast. They were just more interested in cynically and quickly exploiting a newly acquired intellectual property for the purpose of maximizing profits for their brand new streaming platform.
You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility. And before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You're going to sell it.
Rather than telling a story which honored the original and the fans. Our runner-up for worst movie of the year, Cosmic Sin. Now, this is a direct-to-video sci-fi action film, and typically I try to grade these movies a little bit on a curve because I'm well aware that their budgets are much more restricted than theatrical releases, and there's plenty of direct-to-video action movies that I enjoy every single year. This is not one of them.
I got a bad feeling about this.
And usually I don't like to punch down with my end of the year list, but when you make a movie where it feels like every single person was phoning it in, but then you use Bruce Willis and Frank Grillo's face to trick people into renting your movie, that's cynical.
You sit on a throne of lies.
This is truly a bad film composed entirely of parts copied from better movies.
That's awful. Just awful.
And considering its basic premise is very simple, the movie is incredibly confusing. It's actually utterly incomprehensible because so many weird random things are happening and every performance is awful. Whether because it feels like people are phoning it in or because it feels like they're reading their lines off of a cue card that's off screen and they have absolutely no idea which words they're supposed to emphasize. I mean, it is really sad that this is what Bruce Willis's career has turned into. He is one of the great leading men of the last 40 years of my lifetime, and he is just mailing it in with these utterly terrible direct-to-video movies that use his face to trick people into renting the movie or clicking on it on Netflix.
You disgust me. How can you live with yourself?
But my pick for the worst movie of the year is Thunder Force, a movie that takes actually a pretty good premise about middle-aged women being superheroes, gives it a great cast, a big enough budget, and the laziest script imaginable.
Brilliant but lazy.
And that's why this movie is my pick for the worst of the year. It had all the potential to actually be an interesting, fun send-up of the superhero genre with clever insights, witty humor, and just a different take on an oversaturated genre. But instead, we just get Melissa McCarthy running with her usual bag of tricks. There's like two kinds of Melissa McCarthy movies, really good ones, and the ones that she does with her husband that are just entirely lazy, where they improvise everything on set. It's just people riffing back and forth, going for the lowest common denominator and not doing anything clever or witty with the subject matter.
Oh, this is bad. This is really, really bad.
I don't get it. All of Melissa McCarthy's worst movies are the ones that her husband writes and directs. They get all of their friends to join in like Jason Bateman, and then they crap out these lazy, cheap comedies.
That could have gone better.
They have no excuse for how bad these movies turn out because she can be really funny. They have lots of funny friends. Some of the premises, pretty good. The movies themselves, awful. So this is my pick for the worst movie of 2021. If you enjoyed this video, remember I've got 2 companion videos that go along with it on my Patreon page, my most disappointing movies of the year, as well as 5 more of my picks for the worst movies of the year. You can find those at the link down below in the description. Also, I've got more end of the year lists, including tomorrow, my picks for the 10 best movies of the year, and my live stream on Saturday, where I rank all the 2021 movies that I saw this year. Thanks so much for watching in 2021, and keep talking movies too much.